When it comes to destroying SCP-682, the Foundation has tried almost everything, and at this point, it is pretty much certain that the reptile is physically indestructible. But what if we didn't intend to destroy it, but instead used a certain virus to transform it into something else, something that could maybe prove less dangerous? What if we infected SCP-682 with SCP-610? In this video, we try to answer this question. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel with notifications on, so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we plan on exploring more interesting ways to eliminate SCP-682 in future videos. SCP-682 hasn't been tested with SCP-610, so we are going to have to theorize about how this experiment would look like. And if we want to accurately predict the outcome, we are going to have to find another 682 termination attempt featuring another virus in order to see how the hard-to-destroy reptile has dealt with similar threats in the past. The best place to start would be the SCP-682 termination log, the document that describes the dozens of unsuccessful elimination attempts against the lizard. However, most of these tests consist in facing the reptile against another SCP monster, like SCP-096 or 173. Luckily, there is one interaction with a contagious anomaly, namely the test with SCP-409. SCP-409 is a large quartz crystal approximately 5 feet tall and 2 feet wide. The object is anomalous in the fact that anything that comes into contact with 409 will begin to crystallize after a few hours. The crystallization will spread by approximately 1 inch per minute and will convert the entire object or organism, inside and out. Subjects infected with SCP-409 report this to be extremely painful and claim that it feels similar to frostbite. After complete crystallization, the object will begin to make snapping and cracking noises for a few minutes, before bursting into thousands of fragments with great force. And what makes SCP-409 even more dangerous is the fact that these fragments are also contagious, because anything that touches a fragment will also crystallize. To top things off, so far nothing besides SCP-500, the anomalous pill that can cure anything, has proven capable of reversing this effect. And we see why the interaction between SCP-682 and 409 could give us useful information about what would happen with SCP-610, because both anomalies are highly contagious and will infect any organic matter in mere minutes. So how exactly did SCP-682 deal with 409? Well, right after the reptile touched the crystal, it began to tear at the point of contact, injuring itself heavily in the process. In the meantime, SCP-682 demands to know what it has been exposed to, expressing concern. 4 hours later, the reptile begins to crystallize, but at a much slower rate than normal. 4 more hours go by, and SCP-682 is showing signs of extreme physical pain, to the point when it begins having seizures. However, shortly afterward, the crystallization unexpectedly stops, and the crystallized area explodes, causing massive physical trauma to SCP-682. But despite of the loss of limbs and organs, the reptile regenerates very quickly, all the while stating that it will eliminate or consume anyone it sees. And subsequent tests with SCP-409 show that the reptile is now immune to the crystal. Alright, what does this tell us about the way SCP-682 deals with contagious anomalies? Well, it tells us that the reptile can be infected by contagious SCPs, and also that 682 is negatively affected by them. However, it also shows us that with time, the reptile is able to adapt to the danger and stop the spread, which of course isn't a surprise, given SCP-682's incredible adaptation capabilities. And last but not least, the fact that SCP-682 becomes immune to the virus after the initial encounter. So with this new knowledge in mind, let's begin exploring the interaction between the reptile and SCP-610. To begin with, given the outcome of the SCP-409 test, it is most likely that when faced with the flesh it hates, SCP-682 will be infected by it. This means that within a few hours, blemishes will appear on the reptile's skin, slowly consuming its entire body. However, at this point, SCP-682's adaptation should kick in, and the infection should stop before it has fully consumed the reptile's body. The next phase of an SCP-610 infection usually results in the subject's life functions ceasing for a few minutes, and then restarting at a much faster rate. But this isn't anything new to SCP-682. The reptile's life signs have disappeared on more than one occasion during previous tests, and every time this happened, 682 revived, more powerful and aggressive than ever. So, as expected, SCP-610 won't terminate the reptile, but will only enrage it even more. The next phase of an SCP-610 infection usually consists in the subject mutating at a rapid rate, growing more limbs such as arms or legs, but this is where the SCP-682 test becomes a bit uncertain. It is entirely possible that the reptile decides to rid itself of its body parts that have been infected with 610 by simply tearing them off its body and destroying them. And we've seen SCP-682 do similar things in the past, so this won't be anything new either. And in this case, we will have achieved nothing, because SCP-682 will rid itself of all infected material and will now be immune to SCP-610. However, there is another, far more dangerous outcome. As we know, whatever doesn't terminate the reptile only makes it stronger. If SCP-682 sees potential in SCP-610 and decides that certain aspects of the flesh it hates could prove useful, it could decide to adopt these abilities in order to become more dangerous. For example, if SCP-682 decides it could use an extra limb or two, it could choose not to rid itself of its infected body parts. Also, even though the reptile's regeneration is already very fast, SCP-610 is known for causing very rapid growth, so the flesh it hates could help make SCP-682's regeneration even faster. Furthermore, there is one more thing that 682 can adopt from SCP-610. As we know, the flesh it hates not only spreads itself through physical contact, but can also infect people through the minute air particles that all infected subjects produce. If SCP-682 finds this ability useful and thinks that it will help it terminate people faster, then it may decide to adapt this contagious ability. Just imagine a scenario where SCP-682 breaches containment with the help of its newly gained limbs and faster regeneration speed, then makes its way into a city and exhales a massive cloud of SCP-610 particles that infect thousands. Of course, this won't terminate all these civilians, but will merely infect them with the flesh that hates. And SCP-682's life goal is to exterminate all life forms. However, by infecting rather than terminating, 682 will be able to affect people at a much faster rate, and people infected with the flesh that hates aren't exactly living either. So deciding to infect people with SCP-610 instead of physically eliminating them is a trade-off that SCP-682 may be willing to make. And finally, it is even possible that SCP-682 transforms SCP-610 in such a way so that it can control all people who have been infected with the virus, essentially creating an army of flesh-eating monsters that follow it around and do whatever it says. And if SCP-682 escapes in this scenario, we are likely looking at an XK class end of humanity event. So to summarize, infecting the reptile with SCP-610 may seem like a good idea at first, but if we've learned anything from the dozens of failed 682 termination attempts, it's that we're often allowing the reptile to adapt to the methods used, and that we're possibly making SCP-682 more dangerous as a result. So if we want to avoid a scenario where an SCP-682 containment breach could infect the entire planet with SCP-610, and if we don't want to give the reptile the ability to recruit an army of infected flesh-eating monsters, it would be best to keep the hard-to-destroy reptile and the flesh that hates as far away from each other as possible. This concludes our SCP-682 vs SCP-610 termination attempt. So what do you think? Would the lizard decide to keep the infection from SCP-610, and would it happily accept the ability to infect others with the flesh it hates? Let us know in the comments below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, as we will be exploring more interesting SCP-682 termination attempts in the future.